Hi, my name is Max Gagliardi, and this is a Talk Energy podcast. If you're watching this video, take a moment, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, or you can follow me on your favorite podcast app. I really appreciate all the subs and the people that have been sharing the stuff. I say this a lot, but the shares mean a lot. You know who you are. Thanks again for everybody that's participated in the podcast and that's liked it or shared or commented. You guys are the ones that keep me going. And for those of you that haven't subscribed, you don't want to miss an episode, so go ahead, hit the subscribe button or hit the like button. Help me out. This episode's guest is Mike Umbro, the principal of FieldView Capital and the vice president of corporate development for RL Environmental. Mike has spent his career working in the oil and gas industry in California and is actively looking to revitalize some of its oil fields. California has some of the strictest regulations in the country and subsequently some of the cleanest oil fields. Yet the current administration is trying to shut down California's oil and gas industry in favor for importing its energy from some of the world's worst environmental offenders. This episode is filled with discussions about what it's like working in oil and gas in California. We talk about how Mike's company is pioneering new environmental technologies to clean up the oil field and boost economic productivity. And lastly, we talk about California's energy policies and whether or not they're actually helping or hurting the environment that they're trying to save. Hope you enjoy the show.
Sure.
But Mike, welcome to Talk Energy. Thanks for agreeing to come on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
I've been seeing your posts on LinkedIn, and you've been doing a bunch of good stuff, putting interesting, thought-provoking posts out around just kind of a lot of it focused around California and oil and gas, which is not something that's typical. You know, a lot of the people I know and connections I have are obviously Oklahoma, Texas, Denver, Dallas, maybe some in the Northeast, but yeah. I don't know a ton of people in California that work in oil and gas, which was part of the reason why I thought it would be fun to have you on. And the other thing is I just saw you were making some noise and putting out some interesting just like posts, and some of it was like some video stuff that you did. Some other stuff was just about some of these laws and things that California is trying to pass or that has passed. And I thought, man, you would be fun to have on and just get your thoughts on this stuff. But man, we talked a little bit the other day, but just briefly kind of, or not even have to go briefly, to tell me your background, how you got into oil and gas and kind of where you're from and how you got to be a California oil and gas guy.
Yeah, there aren't many of us, especially the younger crowd. But I really just fell into the industry. I got really lucky. I studied Pepperdine. I'm born and raised in San Diego, so I'm not born and raised near the oil fields by any means. But I got out of college in 2005, and I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, but, just kind of take a finance job. I started at Morgan Stanley and didn't really want to be a financial advisor and kind of go that investment banking route also. So I went on with this buy-side mergers and acquisition firm in La Jolla, California. We had a management team out of Houston, and my job was to basically dial for production. Our managing director was trying to start an upstream MLP back in 2006, 2007 timeframe.
Yep.
So that was just, my entry into the space was sourcing, producing assets. And I thought, well, this is really good. I like it. It's a fun industry, really down to earth people. And the financial crisis hit, and I thought, well, our director had failed to raise the money to buy the assets I was sourcing, and I thought, well, somebody's got to. I either have to raise the money, which I don't think I had the network at the time to do, or I should just go put some deals together on my own. And I started FieldView back in 2008, thinking, if not now, then when? And I just kind of stuck with it ever since. And at every downturn, I went and studied energy business at University of Tulsa in 14 to 16. So took that opportunity to really double down on the space and double down on my education and network. And for the past 10 years or so, I guess, I've just been making my work home in Bakersfield and going up there on pretty much a weekly basis and building my network from the ground up and learning the business from the ground up, essentially. So that's kind of the quick take on how I got into it. And now I do some consulting for an environmental service company that processes liquid waste in the oil patch, and then I have a field development with 2 partners that we're working on permits and getting going and have a nice little development that we're working on. And in the meantime, I thought somebody has to at least just share what this industry looks like, and not share it from an activist perspective on either side, not share it with, from our side, some emotion and, these crazy liberal policies and share it from that perspective, but just show the data and show where this oil is coming from, and you tell us where you want to produce it, And so that's kind of been what seems to have struck a chord with a lot of folks. I say a lot, maybe a couple hundred people. I
think a lot. I think there's a lot. You had like the one view, I think you posted some video and it had like 20K views or something. It had a bunch of views on LinkedIn. And I think what you're talking about is kind of this humanization of the oil and gas industry. And I think that's why, for me, the content thing has been interesting, and I'm relatively new to doing this, but I had seen some other, you look around, you see these other oil and gas or energy people doing, this type of content. And I feel like the oil and gas industry is just always kind of behind when it comes to the messaging and the marketing. And I would joke around, like, we're just getting dominated in like this kind of PR marketing world, because all you really see is just the negative stuff. Right. And it's interesting because it becomes like this last election cycle, I told people, and I was like, look, regardless of who I wanted to vote for, it was weird because like my profession was like a mainstream talking point, and a negative one. Right. And you're just, and I think like Elon Musk the other day said it, like on Joe Rogan, he was like, maybe we shouldn't, like, I don't know the exact quote, but he was like, maybe we shouldn't like demonize these people that have spent their whole life, like, providing all this energy that we use every day, saying that that's really probably not that productive. And so I think what you're saying is what I've been seeing the power of, which is just showing it's real people that are providing this energy and doing this. And then it's like, well, what are your alternatives, right? Like you mentioned, which I want to talk about. But before we go into some of that, like, you do have some Oklahoma ties, I guess, University of Tulsa. Right. Tell me how you got, was it remote, or how did you get involved with the University of Tulsa?
Yeah, it still is a remote program. But you go, we did seminars in Denver and Tulsa, in Dallas, Tulsa again. So it was one of those situations where you're at the beginning and the end of the semesters. Typically you're either in Tulsa or getting together with your colleagues. It was just for me, phenomenal. There were a lot of technical folks, either engineers or geologists, landmen, a lot of people that really knew the industry. And I was coming from, hey, I've got this background in finance, but I want to know how this really works from a boots on the ground perspective. And I had been working in the space for, I guess, 6 years at the time. So still pretty young, and I still am, I'm probably 12, 13 years in the space now, but it was just, for me, it was that affirmation that I needed, that I could really get connected. It was kind of before, not before LinkedIn, but before people were really active on LinkedIn, I guess you could say. You'd kind of connect with people, but you didn't see a lot of content being thrown around. And now I have lifelong friends, that have since come to my wedding. I don't have to worry about a place to stay when I go to Midland. I got, one of my best friends out there, and it was a great program. It was really, really solid. Obviously, a solid energy school with a long history in oil and gas. So I loved the TU experience. It was. Did you have some family that were? Yeah. Did you have family? Yeah. My grandpa was an Okie. So I think I got it in my blood somewhere, but he came out west in the Dust Bowl. So that's kind of how. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool, because I grew up in Oklahoma, and so you read about the Dust Bowl is obviously like this noteworthy moment in history that you kind of learn about. Like, they force you to take Oklahoma history growing up, and so that's one of those deals you read about, and so that's kind of cool that like there is some similar lineage where we, probably our grandparents were both here, and then they decided to make the jump when things got really, talk about downturns. That was just a downturn in the environment as well as in the economy. And then they moved out west. So that's kind of, actually, to me, that's really cool.
That's the background. And I was born in Tulsa, so I don't live there anymore. I was born there, and I lived there till I was 14. And so I've just got a really, it's a very nostalgic place for me because as a kid, my dad worked in downtown Tulsa, and I would go, to his office, and I just remember Tulsa as like that place that I grew up. But then I moved in high school to kind of the suburbs of Oklahoma City, and I've basically went to Stillwater, and then I went to school at Oklahoma State, and then have been effectively in Oklahoma City since. But I still have this like weird, just kind of pull towards Tulsa because it's where I was from, and so it's a cool place. I love that.
It's an awesome town.
Yeah,
I love
it. It is. They've done a lot too to build it up recently in the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
And TU's a good campus and a good school as well. So that's awesome that you're able to have that connection. But so talk a little bit about just what it's like being in oil and gas in California. Is it something? Are you like on the download? Are you try to keep that suppressed that's your profession, or are you open about it? I mean, obviously you're on LinkedIn posting about it, so I guess it's probably out there. But what's that like? Is it really like, the mainstream view would be? Is it like if you're in California, everybody hates oil and gas, or is it just kind of like people are like, yeah, whatever, or what's it like?
I think I've gone through some I guess emotional phases through my career of thinking first, okay, well, I don't really talk about what I do in San Diego because there's not really any oil and gas community.
Right.
But that kind of makes it nice because you can kind of unplug on the weekends and not have to really talk work and talk shop and things like that. But what I've really started seeing the past couple of years and started to appreciate is the unique perspective that you get being in California. And I think one of the things that I struggled with earlier in my career was that ability to relate to folks. If I'd go to meetings in Houston or Midland or Tulsa or wherever, I would always kind of have in the back of my mind, are these people just like, who the hell is this guy from California? Yeah. Either trying to tell us, they've got some service offering or, whatever the point of the meeting was. But now I've really realized that California, whether you like it or not, this is the starting line of everything environmental, of everything that we see going on with federal policy or policy recommendations, whether it's cap and trade on a national scale. We've had it here since 2013, whether it's a price on carbon, whether it's, low carbon fuel standard, which we've had for a number of years out here. Setback, upstream development legislation, rules on fracking, and we've got third-party scientific review with the Lawrence Livermore laboratories. I mean, whatever you want to read about, and you can't really escape it in the day-to-day news, especially with Earth Day yesterday. Whatever you want to read about environmentally focused, you can trace it back to California. And that's, I think, one of the things that I'm trying to share with people on LinkedIn, not in a way of like, who's this hippie out west that's telling us about, the rules that are coming, but just a matter of factly, hey, this is happening out here. This is what we're dealing with out here. And whether you like it or not, it's coming. And I think Colorado's felt that over the, recent years. And it's just one of those things where now I feel like it's my role or responsibility just to share what it's like in a very transparent way and to peel back, what some of the challenges are, and are these policies working, and is California really a model we should be imaging our entire country and energy policy around. So that's kind of how I've kind of evolved in my take of being out here.
That's really good. It seems like, so I don't know all the, because I don't live in California, but you read a lot of stuff, which I always try to be careful with what I'm reading and whether or not that's real. But you hear a lot of narratives from the oil and gas side of the world saying like, look how terrible, California's policies are. And this is, again, probably bias towards the right and what people are saying, but they're, they talk about, hey, California's made all these decisions and look how high their gasoline prices are, and they've got power outages, and they've got all these different things that are negative around their energy, around the energy usage and the way that the infrastructure is. Is that a fair characterization? Is it as problematic as people want to try to make it out to be? Because I think people like to point at California and kind of poke at it and say, look how bad it is there. Why are we listening to the state? Or, I mean, is that a blanket thing that's unfair, or are there nuances there where they've done some stuff right and some stuff wrong?
I think it's for sure. It's very complicated, the regulations, whether it's your regulations as a producer in the field, whether it's figuring out cap and trade and really understanding how it works, whether it's, really all the energy, the utility sector is kind of a mess with the wildfires, and PG&E being the major utility up north that, went bankrupt because they're negligent for these fires. And it's so complicated that it's hard to just chip away, the truth. From an operator's perspective, I don't think there's a problem with regulations. I don't think there's a problem with saying, hey, we want you to go through, like for us, we have to go for, obviously California, for those that don't know, most plays are steam injection. So you've got to get your UIC permit to inject steam, or even for a disposal well for that matter. But the process of going through and looking at what aquifers might be, below your lease, that's a good thing. We should make sure we're not fouling the water table. But where it gets really emotional for producers is the permit process. It's like set up to make it feel like they're just going to bleed you to death, and they're just going to, oh, we like your application, we're going to kick it back with some comments. And that's where I think the frustration comes out from the industry of saying, hey, we're down to play by the rules, but just with the fracking permits with Newsom and placing a moratorium on that, now third-party scientific review is being done by the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and they've approved 95 permits. But just yesterday, you see that Newsom's getting ready to put a moratorium on fracking again. So I think for the industry, we're sitting there like, well, what is it? Obviously there's engineers, they're brilliant people. They're going to figure out how to do it the right way, and they're going to abide by all the regulations. But which is it? And that's kind of the really challenging thing for folks out here, is just set the rules and let's play ball and let's get after it. As that's how the mentality of our industry is. So
and I think I had a guy yesterday on the podcast, and he's very involved in the politics side of just the world, but he did energy. He worked for a super PAC, or a PAC for a major public energy company, and then he's just been kind of tangentially involved in different political things. And he was saying that it's interesting because in DC there is just this level of political theater, and I don't think it's just DC, it's like nationally, right? Like Newsom probably has some level of what he's doing is because it's PR, and he thinks it's what the constituents want to hear, and why he was elected, right, to take a hard line stance on whatever, oil and gas or the production. And I think that you're the way you're looking at these problems is saying, okay, cool, like that's a great narrative that people want to push, that we're going to be cleaner, we're going to do better, whatever. But let's see what the actual resulting impacts are from this kind of political theater that we see from a lot of, not just on the left, on the right too, right? I mean, let's just face it. Like, politicians have this thing where they want to grandstand and they want to throw out policies or ideas that, if you really start peeling back the onion, you realize this is not a positive for California, or really for the U.S. And so, talk about some of the things you've posted around why regulations on California production, how is that a negative for the state, and some of the things you would put about kind of the energy mix that you're currently getting in. It's like, okay, well, if we're not going to get barrels here, here's where we are getting barrels for, et cetera. Maybe talk around those topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's first important to look at Kern County, and one of the first posts I put that got a lot of attention was the tax revenue from property taxes from oil and gas producers in Kern County, somewhere around $200 million a year. Now, Kern County is also a leader in the state for development, for wind development. Tehachapi is the largest onshore wind development in the world, and that's in Kern County.
Yeah.
Some of the largest commercial solar installations are in Kern County in the state, but solar pays 1.5 million in property taxes.
Yeah.
So you look at that, and a lot of the policies in California are intended to support quote unquote disadvantaged communities, or promote. We hear the term equity quite frequently, and in my mind, it's like, well, okay, is that equitable for Kern County to say, hey, 200 million that's paying, 2,000 of your teachers, that's paying 25% of your fire department, that's giving huge amounts of money back into the city, you're just going to say that's bad, and we're going to eliminate that. And that post was driven, there was a Senator Wiener, a state senator from San Francisco representing Silicon Valley, was trying to push a bill. It didn't make it out of committee, but was trying to push a bill that basically banned all well stimulation techniques, fracking, steam, anything. Basically, you're not putting anything downhole to get oil out of the ground, which would effectively eliminate oil and gas production in California. So you have this, this political theater, as you mentioned, that, these folks want to be the AOCs of their state houses here in California and just kind of make waves. And then you've got the facts of, hey, this Bakersfield can't survive without that $200 million a year. I mean, you're not even accounting for all the restaurants, all the service industry, all the people that live there and work in oil and gas. I think it's, 300,000 jobs across the state. And we're already the leader in poverty rates in the U.S. So I think that's an important backdrop to understand that despite the challenges with the regulatory climate, California is a top 7 producer, which, as recently as maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were top 5. But if you strip out Kern County itself has, I think, close to 2 billion barrels of proved reserves. And if you rank it, it's kind of right there with Colorado and Wyoming. As a county, it would have that much oil. So there's so much resource here. And I was looking at that and I thought, well, okay, so if we're not going to develop that and we're not going to reap the benefit of billions of dollars over the life cycle of an oil field, who is, and what are they doing to protect the environment? And the top 4 consistent suppliers of crude to California are, I think 2020, the leader was Iraq, number 2 was Saudi, 3 Colombia, 4 Ecuador. Might have the order mixed up on Colombia and Ecuador, but and then it doesn't take much just to kind of research what developments in those places look like, and that's without even taking into account that all that crude comes into the Los Angeles or Long Beach Port Authority or to the Richmond refinery up north on massive tankers burning bunker fuel, and the ports are some of the largest emitters of pollutants in the state. And then it, not to get too down the rabbit hole, but then it gets into that whole notion of, equity in disadvantaged communities, and the communities around the ports are getting hammered with crap air quality. But the LA Times will write a piece that says, hey, it's because of pump jack on, Santa Monica Boulevard behind somebody's house that's been there since 1910. That's causing this air quality issue. And it's like, no, the pump jacks might be ugly in your backyard, but the air quality is a direct result from all the ships in port and just idling off the coast, and SOx and NOx emissions just poof right into the air and they fall into their backyard. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you're talking in a way that I like, because it's like, okay, let's look at, outcomes, right? Let's look at, there's an action and there's a reaction. And the action is we want to limit U.S. onshore production, and in California specifically, and you touched on a lot there. One thing that you touched on that I really is interesting and fascinating to me is that just how much resources in California, and that, as somebody that's been in oil and gas for coming up like 11 years or so, basically I don't hear a lot about it. To your point, you said you go to meetings and it's like, you're in California and it's kind of like viewed as this, it's almost viewed as this area where no one wants to touch or go because of the regulatory aspect of it. Everyone's like, oh yeah, there's a ton of oil there, but you just never hear anybody talking about it. You don't see data rooms, you don't see packages, of production up there for sale. I know it's out there, but it's not what I come across day to day. I come across stuff in Texas or Oklahoma or the Rockies or the Northeast. And California, although has this world-class resource there and historically has been, a place that's produced a lot of energy, and now there's actually innovation. It's not even just oil. So to your point earlier too, there's other forms of energy, and that's great. But why are we restricting this natural resource that, by the way, even some of the videos you posted, like it's beautiful. There's regulations in place, and the area has clearly been maintained and kept, and California wouldn't have it any other way. They're not going to let people tear up the environment there because they've got regulations in place to stop that. And so, but to take it one step further and say, we're not going to allow production at all, we're not going to allow fracking, we're not going to let these things. Well, now you're saying, okay, that's fine. Let's talk about it. Let's just say that's what you guys want to do. Well, then what's our alternatives, which is what you laid out. And then you look at the ripple effects of those alternatives and where it's coming from and what they're doing to the environment. And it's not going to look like what it looks like in your backyard in California when these people are producing in these other countries. It's going to look very, very different. And so, banning a pipeline or stopping drilling on or fracking on federal lands, or, California restricting the amount of production through regulations, like, all that's doing, I think in the environmentalist mind, that's slowing down oil and gas and somehow replacing it. I don't believe that's true. I think the way to replace oil and gas is technology and innovation. And I think that, these restrictive measures, I think they're really just kind of regressive taxes, to be honest. To your point, the air quality issues, that's going to, people that are down by the ports, like you mentioned, are going to be affected by that. And there's going to be, people, it just feels like the disadvantaged people are going to, suffer more for these policy decisions than the normal person. And so I'm kind of rambling on this point, but I'm agreeing with what you're saying. I just think that line of thought that you're putting out there is way too articulate and way too nuanced that it's never going to hit, it's never going to hit a mainstream media article, right? Am I right?
I perhaps, I don't know. I keep waiting. I keep thinking, do reporters dig into these details, and do they look at the fact that Iraq flares more gas in a year than California produces in almost 4 years? It's like, and I think it's just, it's out of sight, out of mind. And I fear that a lot of the environmental movement is missing opportunity to really improve things. I guess two examples in California with cap and trade. Since 2013, cap and trade has generated $9 billion in revenue. And just as an example, $3 billion of that, 30% of that, was spent on this high-speed rail project going from just north of Bakersfield to, I want to say, Merced, or just south of Fresno. And the suggestion was that the farm workers are going to have a high-speed rail to take to work in the Central Valley. And you're just like, and of course, it's years delayed. It's probably never going to be completed because it's prohibitively expensive. And then, the other $6 billion in cap and trade, it's kind of just, when you read the report, I plan to do a post on it, but it's kind of just divvied up into like all these different programs. And it's really hard to understand where all that money's going. And you don't want to think it's, nefarious by design, but you start reading it and you're like, to me, my mind, this is where my mind went, is $9 billion. How many $20,000 Priuses can you buy for disadvantaged families and give them a vehicle that is fuel efficient, 40 miles to the gallon. I think I did the math. It's like 500,000 vehicles. We could have just taken that $9 billion, given 500,000 families in California that couldn't afford a vehicle, a clean vehicle,
right,
and really helped a disadvantaged family. But instead we get, these half-baked construction projects for high-speed rail. And that's the future of that's exactly what we're staring down the pipe of in these Green New Deals, these massive infrastructure plans. And it really doesn't matter Republican or Democrat. It's where is this money being spent? I don't think anybody looks at it like an oil and gas company. Here's the AFE. Let's freaking look at it to the gnat's ass and really where every penny is going. That's not happening, and everybody knows it's not happening. And so I think that's the huge missed opportunity to actually improve the environment.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think that you're exactly right. No one's paying attention to where those dollars are actually being spent. Some of these bills that they've passed recently, even with the kind of under the guise of COVID stimulus, it's like a lot of that money went to things that were not related to that. And that's just government. That's going to be that way. But for me personally, it's like when it happens in my industry, it's like, look, I'm always trying to be goal oriented. And, I don't want to repeat things I've said on other episodes because I say that I have the same thoughts that I tend to repeat. But basically, the way I look at it is like, let's just, invest in things that are actually going to make us achieve the goals we want and to make the environment better. I don't think that there's like many, if any, people in oil and gas that are like anti the environment, right? Like I know a lot of people that are like, that would consider themselves environmentalists. Like I'm somebody that I enjoy the outdoors. I, certainly I like rural. I mean, I live in Oklahoma and I'm pulled towards the outdoors. I don't really even want to live in a big city. I think it's kind of gross, to be honest. And so I don't know that I would necessarily classify myself as an environmentalist, but I certainly love the environment. And so I think most people are in that boat. And it's like, okay, well, we all should be aligned there. And so then it's like, okay, well, then what are the goals? And if the goals are to meet these, these things, you look at what our options are. And is there a mix that needs to be for energy consumption? Yeah, sure. I mean, like, let's invest in these technologies and innovation. But I think anytime that there's something that is oil and gas related, it's like, it's completely pushed away. And it's like, well, that's not realistic because we're going to keep using it. And so if we're going to keep using it, then let's figure out a way to make it cleaner or better that's reasonable and makes economic sense. But it seems like those proposals are not going to be, at your point, like get everybody Priuses, you're going to reduce a ton of emissions and you're going to help disadvantaged people. Just stopping production in California, you're not going to reduce emissions because it's just going to come from somewhere else. And you're going to make poor people pay a lot more money for their gasoline, which is actually going to disadvantage people that are poor. So it doesn't really check any of the boxes of what we're trying to accomplish. And that's where I get frustrated.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I echo that 100%. It's frustrating. And I think it kills innovation too in the industry. Like for us, we're a startup operator. We're looking at ways to, hey, our water that we produce, isn't that briny? It's salty enough to where you're not going to really use it down the road, which is great, right? We're not going to foul anything that could be a usable aquifer in the future. But hey, could we grow a salt tolerant out here? When we have our steam pilot going, and once we prove that, when we're developing, can we capture the flue gas? Can we re-inject that and be zero emissions in the field? Can we put a megawatt of solar out here and use solar to generate steam during the day? Can we do things that will reduce the emissions of our little field here? And then can that be a case study for larger fields? That all kind of gets squashed when the permitting just gets dragged out and your budget gets strung along, and and the majors can afford to say, oh yeah, we're gonna reduce carbon intensity in 20 years, and that's great, if it happens, if they do it. But meanwhile, all the independents are here like, hey, if we could just get our damn permits and get on production, we can start playing with some of this stuff, and we can be a part of that too. So I think there's a big middle ground there, and both sides are on the other side. It's like, how do you get closer together and communicate with each other and build that bridge. I think it will happen, but I know a lot of people that are just totally, thinking everything's just going the wrong way and it's never going to get better for oil and gas. I feel like there's going to be a boomerang effect where people wake up and they're like, oh crap, I don't want to pay $8 at the pump.
Yeah.
let's beef up domestic production. But who knows when that happens.
Well, I think it's easy for people to, that's what I was saying. I had this conversation the other day with someone. It's like, look, it's easy to say for an entire political party to be anti-fracking when you've had, however many years now since 2014, since we saw the big, price collapse. And so, we're coming up on 7-8 years of really cheap gasoline prices and really cheap feedstock prices. And people, that's, about the average. I think they say the average person buys a new car every 6 years. So you've probably got a lot of people with SUVs and trucks, and they're enjoying this lifestyle that they've built. Just kind of, people forget, right? Like, it doesn't take long. It doesn't even take 7 or 8 years for people to forget. It could take 6 months for people to forget how things were. And then it becomes this mindset of, oh, this is good, everything's good. But then to your point, oil prices start to go back up, which I think a lot of what we're talking about in my mind is fairly bullish around the price of oil. And I've said that out loud a bunch, it's hard to predict anything with what's going to happen with prices. But I truly believe with the printing of the money and with the ESG stuff going on and the administration, I think we're going to enter into a period of higher commodity prices. I don't think that's too hot of a take, to be honest. And when that happens, I think you're going to see the average person, when filling up your tank balloons to be some large percentage of your monthly expenses back to where it used to be, kind of when oil was at those levels. I think people are going to start to care more about this, and they're going to say, okay, well, I have to use this. Why are we restricting it? And maybe that'll change behavior, but I don't know, man, I can get cynical about it too sometimes.
Yeah. It's hard. You can go either way, right? It's like, oh man, we're done, or we got to just keep grinding. And,
right. What's it like? Or tell me a little bit about what you're doing with the environmental consulting stuff. Is it some of the things you've mentioned around the permitting and things like that, or what?
No, actually, what we do at RL Environmental, we process liquid waste essentially in the oil field. So what we do, whether it's a water-bearing fluid, drilling muds, foam returns, you name it, or an oil-bearing fluid from tank bottoms, line pigging, things like that. And we recover oil from waste streams, give that back to the operator, and we dewater waste and recycle water and muds and fluids. And so that's another area that I think is really untapped in our industry. I think outside of California, a lot of the model is, let's just take this landfill and get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I'm just finishing a paper on it, actually, of looking at oil field waste as a commodity. And I think we're seeing that more with obviously water midstream. The past 8 years plus has become this booming in itself, and but beyond that, I think there's a lot of ways to improve our practice as a field, handling fluids in the field. Reducing trucking, which I think is something that can have a great impact, both emissions and safety. We all know the roads around Midland are some of the most dangerous highways in the country, and so we're trying to break in there. That kind of gets back to what I was saying before about who's this guy from California telling me he's got a solution for me. So I kind of slow play any business development, because I respect that there's different cultures in the oil patch, but at the same time, there's people that just want to help and want to be on board on the same team. So that's what we're doing, is we're just, we do it out in California, and we think there's opportunity elsewhere, but our time will come. So
yeah, when you go to Midland, it's like you're meeting people and they're asking where you're from, and you get weird looks if you're telling them you're from California.
A little bit of side eye, but once people get to know me, they're like, okay, this guy, we see eye to eye. I think, and that's all it takes. A couple, ranch waters in the bar or whatever. Sure. If you can get people out of the office, you kind of have to. Once you kind of break that relationship barrier of, let's get out of the conference room and have a drink and just, is there an opportunity here? So, but that, for me, quite honestly, that has taken probably 4 years to get with folks that, aren't a friend of mine already, a new relationship.
Right.
It just takes time to build that trust, and especially in our industry. And I like that. I respect that. That's kind of how I am in my personal relationships. I don't just, so it's,
Yeah.
I appreciate that about our industry at the same time.
Well, I think you're using technology to help with this getting to know. I think that I was very, I guess I just didn't view LinkedIn in a very positive light early on. I thought this is just kind of for recruiters, and I wasn't real active on the social media's platforms. But I think with some of your posts and that humanization element that we talked about, I think that there's power in that because. I was reading some of your stuff and I was like, this is somebody I want to talk to. I was like, this guy sounds like somebody that would be fun to have a conversation with. And so I think those types of things too, in COVID, you probably saw, like I did, trying to evolve and figure out, okay, because that was the thing I always thought was like, if I could just get in front of somebody, that's like all I really need to do. And that sometimes is like the hardest thing to do, right? Like it's just really can be hard, like how to get that guy at the bar to have a couple of ranch waters and hang out.
Yep.
And so to get to that point. And so I think this technology stuff and what you've done, so with some of your posts and what I'm trying to do, I think with this podcast is a way to connect with people, I think at the end of the day. And so I think there's power there, but with what you guys are doing on the environmental front, is it something that you're trying to applications that you, like you said, you're trying to get into other basins? Is that part of the mission?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was flying from Midland to Houston to Bakersfield. I was on a plane every other week pre-COVID, and I part of me doesn't miss that. Part of me does miss that. But yeah, we see a lot of opportunity, especially if you're hauling a waste to landfill. That's our opportunity. So what we do, we get on location. We manifest every load. So you got someone out there testing every load in every truck, looking at, if it's oil, looking at oil cuts. Do we really want to send tanker full of 90% oil, 90 barrels of oil and 30 barrels of water and solids to a landfill? If we can get that 90 barrels of oil out before we do it, that's our opportunity. So we see a lot of opportunity in regions that, specifically Midland area. But I think, really it just seems like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I get it. Operators out there, you go from like that 2014 discovery phase where it's like, oh man, we're going to be drilling everywhere out here. And you've got all this upside. Then you got a downturn and new opportunities get shelved. And then you kind of pick things back up again in 16, 17, 18. You're kind of getting your feet back under you. I notice that people are willing to take meetings. It's like, okay, now we're going to look at process optimization. And the process optimization, obviously, it's taking place in the design of the well, at the rig, on the big ticket items. So for us, I think there's a huge opportunity, but the process optimization has to work its way down to, okay, we're in full field development mode. What are we doing with anything that's not being piped? And that's where I see it. So I think we're getting there where we can go into operators and say, hey, we can help you recover oil, in your flowback phase. We can help you recover oil if you're, moving a lot of fluids to disposal that you think you might not need to do that with. I think a lot of folks are looking to frack and not use any water source other than produced water to minimize their draw on the Ogallala or other aquifers. So I think we do all that. In California, I've got a picture at our superintendent's desk of this closed loop, frack job where you just got so many frack tanks lined up, and there's no pits, there's nothing. I mean, it's all closed loop. It's all handled through a closed loop. Maybe similar to what you might see in New Mexico, but as the environmental standards get a little more stringent, I think there's a lot of runway for what we're doing. But it just takes me dancing with enough folks to say, hey, let's do a pilot out here and try it out. So And then it takes, no pandemic, no downturn in the price of oil. Just give me like a 6-month window of a little bit of stability where people aren't like, man, I'm about to get fired, or, we're doing a whole reorg, and,
right.
I get it,
Hey man, I feel your pain. We've got some service businesses as well. It's not similar to what you guys do, but it's definitely service. And, we've seen that. I do think things are picking up. I also think that the price of oil is going to go up, man. I don't know. And I don't think that's that. Again, I don't think that's that hot of a take. I think near term we could see sustained $60, $70. And I think in the medium term, we're going to see 80 plus. And that there's nothing real, some supply demand model that I'm going to show you because that's just what my gut tells me. Yeah. But I think that'll be very good for your model. And so if people want to get a hold of you for that stuff, or they're interested in hearing about that, what's the best way to connect with you?
I guess LinkedIn. Stuff? I mean, I'm on there. Yeah. That's easy.
For sure.
Or my cell phone.
Yeah. I just wanted to give you the chance to throw that plug out. I just didn't know if there was an easy way for people to connect with you on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, really at this point in time, face-to-face is my preferred method. Yeah. I'm ready to get after it, and I'll be in Midland May 23rd. I've never sponsored an event, but I love following Energy Strong. I'm sure everybody in our industry is following those guys now. And I'm like, I'll put FieldView out there and sponsor it and go out. I'll be out there, May 23rd, and probably stay for a lot of the week just for meetings. And so really, I guess the best way is hit me up and whether it's Denver, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Midland, Houston, I don't care. Calgary, I'll go anywhere. Yeah. I've been to all those were all my kind of stopping points in 18 to 19, several times over. So, I just love meeting people and getting face-to-face with folks. So I think that would be the best method for sure.
Absolutely. Tell me about like the development that you said you also do some other stuff as well. I want to hear about, if you can share. I don't know what, oil patch is always a little secretive when it comes to developments, but what do you got going on that front?
Yeah, I don't think it's, I'm fired up and I love it. So we've got a nice little lease. We've been operating for 3 years, really just returning some wells to production, testing water, doing geologic surveys and understanding the geology, doing environmental surveys, looking at wildlife and understanding where we can develop. And so our plan there, it's a heavy oil steam development. We'll have, when it's all said and done, about 150 producers and 70, 80 injection wells. We've got somewhere north of 100 million barrels in our target zone that we're going after. My two partners are industry veterans, Bakersfield guy. I think we have a really dynamic team. Our COO worked for a number of the big independents in California for his 40-year career, and our CEO developed thermal EOR technologies for Chevron for 30 years and simulated, reservoir response for his job for 30 years.
Yeah.
And worked his way up as a corporate reserves advisor and traveling the world for Chevron. So we have, two folks on the technical side, two, petroleum engineer and reservoir engineer that are, in my opinion, about the best you can get
That's awesome.
In terms of knowledge and expertise in exactly what we're doing. We've raised money in March of 20 when oil was somewhere in the mid 20s in our field.
Yeah.
We raised money from 3 individuals, 2 of which own service companies, 1 of which worked with our CEO at Chevron. So I kind of put my investment banker hat on that and said, hey, let's raise money from folks that understand oil and gas, that are willing to play at a smaller level as we prove this field up. And once we're permitted, I'll be going out and raising another 20, 30 million to really start developing this asset. And that kind of speaks to the opportunity that I see for, small companies to speak up. I said in my piece, just in a couple of years, we've spent over $1 million. I mean, which sounds like a lot, but it's really, obviously it's really not that much in the oil patch. It's it just stuff's expensive.
Yeah.
But all of that was spent with Kern County service providers for the most part. And, you know, when we're spending 20, 30 million bucks over the next 2 years, you know, and then we're going to be spending more, you know, we're going to probably drop 150 million into developing this field. You know, we kind of see it being cash flow positive after we get that next bump of 20, 30 million invested into it. Anything can change with oil prices, but we're going slow so that we can weather these ups and downs. But that money's going to be spent in Kern County, you know, and that doesn't even assume any of the property tax we're going to be generating, any of that. And that's just money spent with service companies that just our little tiny little operation is going to have an impact in Kern County. And when you think about that over the broader, you know, San Joaquin Valley, it's powerful. So I'm excited. You know, I've told a lot of people, never been more excited to be in the industry. I know it's hard because we see a lot of folks on LinkedIn that are looking for work, and, you know, your heart goes out to people that are in that situation. And, you know, I've just always been one to take a lot of risk and always just keep pushing the chips into the table and keep the risk out there with the belief that if you can weather the downturns, that's going to be your reward. And, you know, you get stressed certain times, and certain times you don't feel the pinch as much, but, you know, you just keep believing in what you're doing. And I believe 100% in what we're doing. And I don't have a doomsday attitude towards California oil and gas. I think that the industry has a bright future. It's just, you got to play by the rules and the rules and keep them steady for a while.
Yeah. That's awesome, that development. I mean, I think that's the kind of stuff that gets me fired up too. I've just grown up around it, you know, being in Oklahoma and seeing it, and to your point around the community aspects of it. And I see it firsthand. You know, you see areas that go kind of into a boom mode when a new plays pop up, and then you hear about you know, you can see it with the impact on the community, and then you hear about the way that it changes people's lives. You hear about stories, everything from somebody, you know, that's a friend of yours whose parents are like, you know, like a high school teacher or a football coach or something, and they've got some royalty in their family, and, you know, that they've passed down. And next thing you know, someone's drilling a well out there, and it comes on at 1,500 barrels a day, and it changes these people's lives. And you're like, that couldn't have happened to a better group of people. And, or you see, like, you know, just all these things happening in a community, and you're like, man, that's just, it's so powerful. And then that's not even the tax dollars to all these different things that it goes to. And Oklahoma is not shy about the fact that our economy and the way that, you know, the reason that a lot of us are even here is because of their natural resources under our feet. So everything you're saying resonates very much with me in my worldview. And I think it's really powerful for the people that understand the impact that can have. And to the other point you made around all the local service providers, I mean, that's directly into these oftentimes blue collar professions that are hardworking people making a living and doing a service that everybody benefits from. Energy, right? Everybody benefits from that. And so I just see I'm super biased, but I think it's noble. I think it's noble. I think it's noble what you're doing. And I think that I'm excited for you guys in that new development. And I'll be excited to continue to follow you on LinkedIn and see where things go. And I'm glad I got to get you on, man. I'm kind of butting up against time, but really great conversation. And if you are in Oklahoma City, make sure not to be a stranger. And
absolutely. And likewise, come on out to California and come see. It's a beautiful area. So
are you in San Diego? Is that where you're at?
I am right now. Yeah. So I commute every week. So it's worth it. You know, I love Bakersfield. I love where I live too, but I tell you what, there's not a better way to put in perspective the energy challenges when you drive that 5 and you get to Bakersfield after 215 miles, and you look back and you're like, you know what? I only saw like 5 electric vehicles on this freeway, but we leave the state in EV. You know, it puts it all in perspective that this is a long runway for our industry, despite what we hear. So I appreciate you having me on, and I hope that everybody just if they take anything away from the message, is this is a long runway, and we need to keep our head up in this industry because we've got a long way to go and a lot of people to help.
Absolutely, Mike. Thanks so much again for coming on.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks, man.